My name is Tiffany Spraggins Payne. I'm your host of Zigzag, which highlights women entrepreneurs and industry leaders of the science, technology, transportation, engineering, and mathematic industries. We talk to these women about their business models and how they differ from their competitors. Today, my guest is Bonnie Bogle. She is the Philadelphia director of a national organization, Brazen, which helps women's entrepreneurs grow their businesses through community, connections, and programming designed to teach hard business skills. They assist women at all levels of stages of business. Welcome, Bonnie.
Hi, it's great to be here.
So great to have you today. So before we jump into our interview, Bonnie, could you provide your perspective on venture capital and when might be a good time for business owners to seek out this sort of funding?
Sure. Venture capital can be an amazing benefit and boon to any company, but it's also incredibly hard to get, particularly for women and particularly even more so for women of color. So I think the real value behind it is for companies that are ready to not just grow, but to explode onto the scene. It's companies that require funding to even get out of the gates. So you can see this in Philadelphia. You can see this with a lot of our life science companies, for example, that if you're working on like a new medicine or a new medical device, it's very hard to get going without having a big infusion of money, and you're not going to have any revenue until that's more tested. You see this a lot in the technology space too, where a lot of technology and apps in particular might have a lot of user base or value in hidden ways that might also not be revenue based. For example, in service industries, you almost never see the need for this high infusion of cash, just because they can make money in the meantime, and also like their returns might never be so high, the exit might not be so high. So I think like the real as people are considering venture capital, I think the better question is to think through what are their goals for their business? How do they want to one day exit it? And how do they see making money at some point? And I think if they sketch out what their vision is for over a period of time, from 6 months to a year to 3 years, and think through really like how they see growth looking for them and for their company, and think big. Don't get me wrong. Everybody should be thinking very, very big here.
Yes.
But what sort of cash infusion that they need in order to get there, to hit their goals, and then also think through what sort of ways there are to get that. If somebody needs an amount that might only be $250,000, which seems like a lot of money, venture capital might not be the smartest way to go, just because you might be able to get it faster and easier somewhere else.
Through like friends and family.
Through friends and family, through bank loans, SBA-backed loans, particularly for women entrepreneurs or minority-based companies. Those are always options. And then, crowdfunding is an option. There's more and more things popping up to kind of solve this question of how can you finance a business, knowing that getting venture, while it can be totally awesome, is very hard to do. So.
And you've done some work in the venture capitalist space, correct?
I have done some work. I have been on the receiving end of venture money, which is both wonderful and also very stressful, I must say. And that was with my last company, Mapbox, where when I was there, we raised 2 different rounds of VC money for about $52 million. And then they've continued on for additional funding since I've left. So that entered us into a very different growth paradigm than beforehand, when we were more of a slow-growing company versus the high-growth, looking for a high return. I'm also part of a venture partnership firm now called Next Gen Ventures, where it's a bit of a different take on venture capital.
Yes.
In that, generally speaking, when you're at a venture firm, it's a handful of partners that make decisions, and they've been doing it for years. Oftentimes you see that these people tend to look alike. It's a lot of men, as we all know, a lot of white men who live in San Francisco or in the Valley. At NextGen, what it is it's really a partnership of, we're about 1,000 people who play with much smaller sums of money, but we have access to interesting business ideas, and the fund itself decides on which ones and vets them and does a lot of the diligence around that. But then all the different partners can go in for smaller sums to help grow that investment level. So it's a way to get in front of a different looking group of people. And when it started, it was mostly people who were in their 30s. which is, about 20 years younger than a lot of the big VC partners that you'll end up meeting. So I've just been dabbling with that to see what it looks like from the other side of the table. And also because it's just really interesting to hear about all the different companies that are doing interesting work and have these amazing ideas out there, and to hear early stage what they're working on.
That's really awesome. And I love that you have that background because it really speaks to the work that you're really poised to do around Brazen, having started this new local chapter in Philadelphia. It's a evidence-based membership program. Take us through Brazen and what its business model is.
Sure. So with Brazen, what our underlying goal is to help women entrepreneurs grow their business. And this comes from just in recent years, in the past 10 years, we have seen a surge in the amount of women who are starting and running their own business, which is just frankly just amazing. We see even higher numbers if you look at women of color doing this.
Yes.
Which it just gets better, right?
Right.
But what you often see is that these women, they are supporting themselves with their business and their families potentially, but oftentimes they don't hire additional employees. It's just themselves. And a lot of them don't make a ton of money. There's a very small percentage that make more than $1 million. So where Brazen comes in is we want to help women entrepreneurs who are looking to grow their business, whether that's through hiring, through increasing revenue, and that could be on a small scale. Maybe that's somebody who's just starting out and wants to make enough money to support themselves, and that's getting to, say making $100,000 a year. Or perhaps that's the company that wants to go big and be the next brand name that we all hear about and talk about around the dinner table. And we want to help with those growth moments and people in that mindset who want to take it to the next level and give them the continuous support to do so. We approach that in several different ways. A lot of that is that being an entrepreneur is a lonely road. By nature, you're doing it on your own. It's your own business. Even if you do have employees, oftentimes you're the decision maker. So you might not necessarily get to discuss everything with your employees because sometimes it's scary if you're not going to make payroll at the end of the month, for example.
Yes.
So we provide a community for women to get together and talk with each other who are going down the same path. A lot of commonalities are shared across industry. And when you're thinking about how to grow a business, that's hiring, that's finances, that's legal, and that's just thinking about how do you actually grow a company and how do you scale it. We find that there's just a lot of shared experiences that happen. And so what we try to do is create communities where people can come together and have just really honest conversations. So we do this. We have peer advisory groups is our most structured way of doing that. And that's people can apply. And we place them with other entrepreneurs that are in a similar spot in their company trajectory. And they come together and they talk about their business challenges. We have some technologies that supports this to make sure that we have really productive meetings. And the goal is that everybody leaves with answers, support, and next actions to hold them accountable. We also just do this through community and, social events and whatnot. Yes. So a lot of the softer side of things, the fun aspects. And then we also focus on providing educational support. Our niche really is operations behind how do you run and scale a company. So no matter what you might be working on, whether you're selling clothes, creating a new fashion line, you have a food cart that you want to take into a restaurant dynasty. You have an app that you want to be in everybody's cell phone. Whatever that may be, a lot of the actual nuts and bolts of how do you grow that? How do you think about business planning? How do you think about money? How much money do you need to actually do this? What steps do you take? What about marketing? A lot of these skills are shared just across industries and across kind of different stages of companies as well. So what we try to do is provide education, ideas, and connections, both to experts in this area, so that people can learn these hard business goals. And a lot of this is these are topics you might learn about when you're getting your MBA, but most entrepreneurs don't have an MBA, and that's totally fine. Right. So what we try to do is provide information and education and also expert advice around these topics that people can pull down when they need to, depending on where they are with their company.
That's awesome. Would you say within the growth groups, there's a hybrid between C-suite, women who are working in the corporate space or maybe in the private sector, but then also these emerging entrepreneurs? What's the demographic that's making up these particular groups?
That's a great question. So our focus really is on founders. It's on CEOs of companies who are making the decisions, but also most of our members, most of them have started their own company. So some of them might have experience at the executive level in larger companies. And, or maybe they could be a CEO of, one example is somebody who has a family business and she took it over. She's third generation.
Right.
So she's CEO of that, and she wasn't a founder, but she's making all the decisions right now. And she wants to grow the company. She wants to take it further than her father did or her grandfather did. That would be an example of people that could be part of a growth group. But it is kind of kept to people, not just professionals working in larger companies, but people who are active decision makers and usually in their own companies.
That's really awesome. And talk about some of your member events. So is this a subscription model, Brazen?
Yeah, so we're a membership-based organization. So our members sign up, and then all of our events are free for our members. So that involves our focus. We have a monthly roundtable, and this is, generally speaking, it's a small conversation. We try to limit it to 10 to 15 people, and we talk about different topics of interest. Our very first one was last month and was on hiring. How do you hire strategically, and how do you think about it? It was a great conversation. We had people in the room that were looking at growing outside of it was them and a co-founder. They were going to be making some of their first hires in the next few months.
Yes.
It was two women who were expanding into Boston and were hiring 72 people in the next 3 months. There was a pretty big difference in what people were looking for, but the questions, a lot of them were the same. When do I hire a contractor versus an employee? How do I conduct an interview? How do I really vet people? What are some of the liability concerns I need to have? And we had a hiring pro with startup and experience just walk us through all of what to do and answer questions. And it was great. People took a lot of notes. So
that's really awesome. How are you going about curating the speakers for these monthly events? Is it amongst your membership base that women are emerging and kind of sharing their expertise?
It's a bit of, I would say that we're still figuring that piece out. So I have a founding committee that is of 6 amazing women that are immersed in the startup scene here, either as entrepreneurs or as supporters of entrepreneurs here in Philadelphia. And they've been instrumental in directing me to great speakers and people I should talk to as I kind of figure out some of this. A lot of the topics have come from direct conversations I've had with members and with just local entrepreneurs of things that are on their mind, the biggest challenges they're facing. Hiring was one that came up again and again, so we focused on that. Our next event is on how to tell your founder story. That came out of, I met the speaker and she's amazing. She's a former comedian, now storyteller, and she works with people to get you like their truth, their real story, which when you're running your own company is normally interesting. It's compelling. Why you got in to solve whatever problem you're trying to solve or the service you're trying to provide is interesting. And is often something that can set you apart from your competition, particularly if you're going up against larger companies that don't have the same personality that small companies can have. So that'll be a workshop, and that'll be really interesting. And that's something that, again, came up again and again when I was talking to our members about them wanting to figure out how to pitch better. And it's not necessarily just pitching for how to get investment, which is something that's covered pretty well in the Philadelphia area. But how do you pitch to get sales, get people interested, build brand loyalty, get your mom excited, whatever it may be.
Would you say that Brazen's unique value proposition is that you guys are a tribe of sorts? So you have in-person events, you have monthly power hours, and then you have the growth groups, which is a form of an online platform where women can come and kind of congregate and share those best practices.
Yes. So those are definitely our strengths, is that we offer our members different ways to participate, knowing that everybody has such busy schedules, entrepreneurs more so than maybe anybody. Women entrepreneurs even more so when you throw in families and children and a lot of the other responsibilities we all have. So with Brazen, we really want to design a flexible program that has a lot of room for people to take on a lot for when they need it, but also know that they still have support even when their schedules are insane and they might not be able to participate as much as they'd like. So this is why we have this rotating kind of list of regular roundtables discussions where you can learn things, but it's not a curriculum. So you can come in and out at any time. For people who are part of our growth groups, this is a little bit more of our structured support that we offer. And we do ask people to come each month because you're supporting your peers.
Yes.
So we ask, that's a very small community. And we ask for people to have skin in the game to participate. And that's where you can get really deep advice and deep connections.
Yes. And
then additionally, we have some of the lighter touches where, yes, you can meet with experts for office hours, which we have monthly. Do whenever it makes sense for you. Ideally, it'll be there when you really need it, when you have a contract to review and you don't have a lawyer yet, or you have an accounting question that's pressing, but you don't have an accountant, any of those things. But then also what we really want is to create this community where the community's there when you need them too. So that we have a way via our platform, our tools. And a lot of this too is just, some of the social media stuff we're always on too, with Facebook groups and Slack and things like that.
I love it.
But for a way for people to continue to support each other continually within their lives.
That's awesome. Just recently, I had a conversation with Amanda Stamberg, the founder of thedailyworth.com. You've heard of it, I'm sure. I love it because that whole focus of that online platform is connecting women to financial literacy tools. And I love that Brazen is connecting women to all forms of entrepreneurship and business development support. In your experience having gone through some rounds of venture capital, talk to our listeners, particularly the women who are launching a business, that are looking to Brazen as a potential resource and tool in a community to help them launch their business or even further their efforts. Talk to us about how important venture capital is and what some of your experiences might have been going through maybe one or two rounds.
What I normally tell people starting out is to think of every possible way to fund their company before they think about taking on venture capital money. And that's for several reasons. One is that you give up a lot of control early on, or at least whenever you take venture funding, you give up control of your company. Also, you set a very specific return in that venture capitalists are looking for very large returns. So modest growth is not what's normally interesting for them. But I mean, also just to get right to it, it's incredibly hard to actually successfully get venture capital money, even less so if you're a woman, even less so if you're a woman of color.
Yes.
So I think some of the best advice we can give to people is to look at all the other options first, see what's out there, see what sort of money you can get to fund your company in slower pieces. Find ways to make money. Yes. A lot of venture-backed companies don't actually make any money, and they're looking to create, to make money maybe 10 years down the road. That's not a normal company. And this is wonderful for a lot of products that we're innovating on and creates ways that we can stay ahead in the world and a lot of things, of course. But it's not a normal business. So typically, what I recommend for people is to really think through what they want out of their company, what their goals are looking at 6 months out to a year, and then looking a little further out. I've personally always struggled looking more than 2 years out, and I've really found the sweet spot to be 6 months because you can make things concrete. You can figure out what your next steps are to get there. And if that is to have enough money to pay a team of 10, how do you get there? If you're thinking already about going from 0 to 50, that gets a lot more amorphous. How can you plan for that? And I'm not sure anyone really knows the answer to do so. And when you're asked to make business plans looking far out for 3 years or so, which is standard, everybody knows that the last year and a half is made up. And a lot will change in that year and a half because technology will change, the world will change, the economy will change, let alone your business ideas and what you've learned in the year and a half that's gotten you so far of what your customers actually want, what's working, what's not. So I would say the advice is really just hunker down, look at what you can do with the resources that either you can come up with on your own or what else is out there. And then if it is one of those things where you need $1 million, it's a lot of money.
Yes.
So then what does it look like to actually raise money and how much time does that take? Because it also takes a lot of time where you're not working on your company, but you're working on getting money. Mm-hmm. So kind of weigh the different options out there. I mean, venture capital money is cool, right? Everybody wants it. Everybody likes to talk about it. You get a lot of splash in the media when that happens. You get a big tick up.
Yes.
And for a lot of companies, it's what makes them. But again, it's very hard to get, and it's a hard road to go down to actually even compete for the money. So I think anyone going down that path needs to make sure that that's the right path for them and that they're willing to make the sacrifices it will take, which is a lot of rejection and 80-hour weeks.
That's an awesome segue into my next question, which is you're a dynamic leader. And I'm sure you've served on many different teams where you've been able to kind of, bring a lot of innovation and tools and resources to your respective space. Talk to our audience about your background. What has your career trajectory been like? And why Brazen? Why Philadelphia?
So my career trajectory is unique, I would say. So with two friends from college, I helped start a company called Development Seed. And what we did was build online tools for largely nonprofits and international development organizations. We started this, we were right out of college and had some free time, honestly. And it was also one of those periods of time when, generally speaking, you're underutilized at whatever your normal job is. That was our experience. Mine in particular, I had a lot of free time at work that I would have loved to put to work for my job, but my full-time job, but it wasn't really the platform for that. But also it was this interesting time in technology where it was like the early 2000s. For the first time, there's a lot of technology out there where you can manipulate content. So this is when online content management systems were starting. This was when blogs were first starting. And there was this way for people to communicate more quickly online. And it wasn't something that you needed to be highly technical to do. A lot of nonprofits and international development organizations, which is where our passions were, they had very outdated websites that were expensive and they couldn't update. So they were immediately less useful. And so it was this moment in time where there was open source technology out there where you didn't have to be tied to money necessarily, to a large amount of funding in order to publish online. So we started working with organizations to help them get their content out there. And then we very, very slowly grew. It took 4 years before I went on full time to the company. And then slowly we started adding more people, developers and whatnot. But then kind of took that into a much more advanced technology and mostly had hired developers to kind of build this out with us as we figured it out ourselves as well. From that, one of the products that we ended up building was a mapping platform. And this was, as I said, a lot of our clients are international development organizations. Google Maps just came out in 2007, even though it feels like it's been around our entire lives.
Right.
And a lot of, and this was a little bit after this time, but a lot of our clients wanted maps on their website, but Google didn't have maps of places like Haiti or Afghanistan or Kenya where we were doing work. And a lot of our clients were, say, for example, the Red Cross, who needed roadmaps so that they could do better humanitarian response to droughts or floods or whatever it may be. So having good map data was really important. So we had to figure out how to first off, how to get map data for these countries. And then we figured out how to put it online.
Wow.
And then we had the beginnings of a mapping platform. So that was something that we got very interested in as we were doing our normal consulting work and started to really focus on. And then in 2013, decided to split up the two companies. And then Mapbox came out. Okay. And that was the one we went after VC money for there and decided to grow it. And now Mapbox is doing amazing. There's about 400 people that work there.
Wow.
Best known client would be Snapchat.
Okay.
So I always impress my nephews with that one, where I ask them to pull it up. I'm like, my company made that. Snap Maps. So,
that's so awesome.
We're also in the Weather Channel app. So that's, again, my parents like that when they show their friends the Weather Channel maps and say, like, my daughter helped build that. Yeah, so it was two very different trajectories. And my role within both companies was to more or less figure out how to run a company.
Yes.
How to build out the foundation and the operational function. And for the first company, it was slow growth. A lot of it was brand new for me. It was down to the point of, how do I read a contract? How do I make it so that people sign my contract versus their contract that's 30 pages long and I don't understand it all and I can't afford a lawyer? And how do I manage our finances in a way that I know that we'll be able to pay everybody and I don't want to involve an accountant until I need an accountant, of course, each quarter, each year, because I was trying to maximize our resources. And then very differently with the high growth company, where a lot of my focus went on, how do I build a team out that is the team we want to be a part of this company? How do we grow a diverse team when we're hiring very technical developers as fast as we can?
Yes.
How do we interview them to make sure they're as skilled as possible? And most importantly for us was, how do we know that they're on board? Because we were a startup that we were well funded pretty early on, but also we were very mission based. We had big beliefs in open data and open technology as much as possible, even as we were building this tool that we sold.
Yes.
We wanted to build a diverse team where we all supported each other. And also that we were creating a work environment where everybody really had a lot of growth, personal growth. And that to do that in different ways. If you're a developer, you could have that technically, but you can also get involved in recruiting, in public speaking, in teaching, and in different pieces. So that was very important to us to build a culture around that. So that was, honestly, that was a highlight for me. That was really fun. And that was where I got to really be a leader in setting up the culture on those pieces. And I like to put it of like figuring out who we wanted to be when we grew up.
I think it's so cool that you started these businesses and you sold some businesses. Could you talk a little bit about how creative exits or succession planning, and what does that look like? What does that feel like post moving on to the next venture?
Sure. So with our first company, and this was something that I wasn't a co-founder, but I was there from the early days for Development Seed. And but we orchestrated a great exit for that company because we believed strongly in what the company was doing and had some staff that wanted to stay on with the consulting work because it's very mission driven. We were helping international development organizations do better work. And some people were much more interested in that than doing a startup play where, we were trying to get into Snapchat. So,
Yes.
so the CEO did a lot of this work, but we ended up selling it to a very good friend of ours who then is currently running the company. They're doing amazing work, use a lot of Mapbox tools. So there's a lot of
synergy between.
Exactly.
That's awesome.
Exactly. And they have a team of about 30 people now. They use a lot of the operational systems I set up. I'm on the board of directors. I help out where they have a question, and you have a need, but they're doing wonderful. And that was something that it set up more for the success of the company than for any sort of necessary gain on our part, although, there was some of that too. And then for Mapbox, I exited the company about a year ago. And the company continues on. So my exit was different than the company's. But I mean, it was something that, again, was just helpful. I sat down with the other co-founders and we all knew that at some point life was going to come up and we were going to want different things. So we were just able to come up to an agreement. We all knew that at some point all of us would be in the spot I was in, and we wanted to take care of each other. And we had some money at the time, so that's easier to do than when you don't have any money. And we kind of set that up. So succession planning, I mean, I guess that's the best I can speak to it.
No, that's real, and what I love about your story is that you are essentially creating a platform right now where other women could glean insights, not only from you, but you're building a whole team of trusted advisors for other women. Talk about some of the early stage mentors that you've had that kind of help shepherd you along. For some women, they haven't had mentors, and they talk about their anti-mentors. What has your journey been like in that mentorship space?
I think one of the things that really drew me to Brazen was that it's a resource that would have been incredibly helpful to me early in my career. And it was something that I didn't know how to have access to. And I think this is partly that going back 10, 15 years when I was starting my first company and kind of doing things for the very first time, like the same sort of support for entrepreneurs didn't exist. Being an entrepreneur wasn't as common as it is now, and it wasn't as celebrated as it is now.
Yes.
So even among my friends, a lot of them were basically, they couldn't understand why I couldn't join them for happy hour most nights. Or, like on weekends, I also worked. Yes. That was, would always ask me why and how much money I was making. And then I'd be like, none. And thank you for reminding me.
Labor of love.
Exactly. So I think then it was one of those things I had to kind of figure out. And so I ended up slowly building a peer group who was very helpful, just bouncing ideas off of when I needed something, if I needed, a lawyer recommendation quickly,
yes,
or just to talk something through. I had this network of friends, but it took me years to build up that peer support. And then additionally, same for mentors, and kind of walking the line of, is this person trying to sell me something, or are they really trying to mentor me? Because I started out when we were on our own. And we were, the people that were running our companies we were all peers. We were all the same age group. We had the same general experience, different talents. So it was a lot of deciphering that. So I think Brazen is one of those things that what I would like to build Brazen to be is a way to get past all of that and get to that point quicker, so that you can find mentors who are valuable mentors. You can find experts who aren't trying to sell you things. They're just trying to get you advice because they want you to succeed, and to build those peer groups quicker, so you don't have to find them over a million, glasses of wine or coffee or whatever it is. But you can find them, in a couple of sessions. Yeah. But I mean, that said, I've certainly had a lot of mentors and support and role models who have helped me kind of shape how I wanted to build companies and what my ideals should be around that. My parents being my first ones of always kind of setting the stage that, of just making value-based decisions. And that, what's important is to be connected to community and to be doing good, even when you're doing things that might also get you some money. But to be passionate about what you're working on. I think the rest has just kind of been figuring it out.
That's great. I love this whole notion of ambiguity and just kind of like feeling your way through the dark and then creating something awesome out of nothing. So for those who are listening and they just want some quick tips on how you've been able to essentially just kind of hack the process of like building a great team and building a strong group of, I'm going to say trusted advisors around you, what might be some tips that you can impart to our listeners today?
For building a great team, I would say that was probably the biggest value I got and the biggest push I got for both keeping me going when things were hard, but also helping me think outside of the box, and for really just the drive to continue to build the best that you can. So I think who you surround yourself with is hugely important. As far as how to evaluate how to do that, I would say think about what's important to you and your company, and just be really upfront with yourself. For me, particularly for my last company, for Mapbox, what that meant was, it did not mean work-life balance, for example, but what it meant was people who were absolutely tenacious in building the best product, highly driven, amazingly smart in different ways, but also came at things with different angles. I wanted people around me that thought differently than me. And also, we talked a lot about how we work together, very upfront. And that was something that was helpful because then everyone was on the same page. And you didn't have, I'm not much more of a writer to think things out than I am a talker to think things out. So that's an important thing when you're working with people, that if I had someone next to me who needed to talk all the time, that slows me down. So being able to communicate in writing, even if we were in the same room, was helpful. Obviously not all the time. And then as far as for building your advisors or the people that are going to be supporting you, whether they're mentors, just straight up advisors, people you might even pay for advice. Again, I would say, think about the gaps in your game. What do you most need? Particularly when you're looking for advisors, this is great. One might be like, can you have access to somebody who's had a wonderful sales trajectory in their career?
Yes.
And can they give you some fast tips? Same for marketing. And these are pieces that often when you're later stage in your company, like you'll bring in people in-house to do that, but probably not at first unless you have that sort of background. So what are the gaps in your game and how do you support that? And a lot of it you can do just by getting people passionate about what you're building, what you're doing. So if you can get that on, that's great. If not, if you can pay a little bit, that's helpful too. Yeah. And then also I would, again, be upfront about how you want to work with these people, what the commitment is you're looking for. But also, do you want to just have an hour conversation once a week? Do you want to have them on call for when you need them? Do you want them to do work? And it's very setting the tone and the expectations is very important to making sure that both people are going to have a productive relationship out of it.
So in the spirit of helping these women CEOs close skill gaps and really take their business venture to the next level, for you, how might you define success, particularly launching this huge initiative here in Philadelphia?
Me personally?
Yeah, you personally.
That's another good question. What I'm looking at now, so I've been working with Brazen for about 5 months, and we just launched. So a lot of that was laying some groundwork. I'm newly returned to Philadelphia too. So I grew up here, but spent most of my career in DC and then with a lot of time also in San Francisco. So it's been a lot of learning for me about what's going on in the ecosystem here, what our entrepreneurs locally need versus the scenes in DC and San Francisco are different. Like who are we here in Philadelphia and how can I build something to best serve these people?
Yes.
So it's already been a ton of learning. And that's one of my personal benchmarks for success is that I like to learn and be challenged. So I try to set myself up to do those things.
Awesome.
And even just in small examples of that, more public speaking, because I'm not normally comfortable doing that. So like trying to put myself outside of the box.
And this is your first debut on a podcast.
It is my very first.
And you're doing outstanding, I might say.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I hope so.
Just again, as we close, I want you to talk about how women can go about accessing you, accessing Brazen. You have an event that's coming up soon. How can we connect with you?
Yes. So I would love every woman entrepreneur to connect with Brazen or any women who are considering starting their own business. I would like to hear from you and what you're up to. We're brazenphilly.com. You can always find out more information there. Our next event is on June 19th. It's a roundtable on, like I mentioned before, on telling your founder story. But we have these monthly events that are open to the public, but also they're free for our members. But then also I'm constantly meeting with entrepreneurs and I would love to sit down and grab a cup of coffee with you if this sounds interesting. And also, like I just said, I'm always trying to learn what people need and what they're looking for. And we're in our early days here with Brazen in Philadelphia, and our goal is to build a community and a resource that's really going to help women grow their businesses. And that's us figuring that out and building something that's going to help people. And it's going to be a lot of learning together as we go and crafting something that's just highly useful is my goal.
That's really awesome. It was such a pleasure to have you on Zigzag today.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. So proud of you. You did a great job. You're public speaking. For more information about Zigzag, you can find us at www.theenterprisecenter.com. This is Tiffany Spraggins-Payne, and I'm signing off.
Hello, everyone. This is Ryan Martin, the production consultant for The Grit Live. If you enjoy our programming, the most important thing you can do to support us is share each episode with your friends and family. You can also leave us a rating and a review on the podcast player of your choice to help others find us. Thank you for listening.